Again, I'm meteorologist Nick Stewart, and we're going to be looking at the forecast going forward. We now do have winter weather alerts issued for portions of the Midwest, and this will only continue to get kind of expanded farther and farther eastward with time as confidence continues to increase and the onset of that snow continues to get increased as well. So let's take a look right now at those winter weather alerts. You can see in blue, those are the winter storm watches that are in effect. This includes much of the state of Iowa. This will also include northern Missouri into west central Illinois. Now, you may notice much of Wisconsin, northern Illinois into Michigan. No watches yet. That's just because the onset of the snow is still outside of the window from when we would normally issue these. I guarantee you we will see more alerts extended farther off to the east and northeast. We also do have winter storm warnings in effect for far eastern portions of Nebraska into western Iowa as well. So there is that threat for some very heavy snowfall coming within the next about day or two. Again, our forecast really hasn't changed too much. We did our first discussion on this winter storm. We're talking about was about a week ago. I believe it was last Monday. And, well, here we are about a week later. And the forecast in terms of the overall idea of an area of high impact travel, that looks pretty likely here. And we are likely going to start seeing some accumulation here pretty shortly. I think this is kind of a very broad idea of what I'm thinking about in terms of that snowfall threat. The heaviest snow will likely be eastern Iowa, southeastern Iowa to south central Iowa, west central Illinois into southern Wisconsin. This is where we have two areas of energy kind of wrapping up together that will kind of sit on top of each other and produce some locally heavy snowfall. So that is the area that looks pretty intriguing to me in terms of the highest potential snowfall threat. We're also seeing snow ongoing farther off to the west as well. Nebraska, kind of a pretty good chance there's some snowfall tonight into the next wave as well as we go through Tuesday and Wednesday. So kind of a few different events kind of stacking on top of each other. Again, this is just kind of a quick idea in terms of the snowfall forecast for what I'm thinking going forward. But again, things will change just a little bit here and there. I do have some wider ranges as well because I'm kind of covering a larger area here. Again, I really ask you to also look at your local forecasters, local meteorologists as well to kind of see their forecast because they're going to be really fine-tuning the local areas. So let's go ahead and look at the forecast from the National Weather Service. This is the current, what we call the deterministic forecast. So this is basically a point forecast for a bunch of different locations, and there's no ranges on this, but this is just kind of an idea of what like the middle point of their forecast is. And I would probably add at least 2 to 3 inches in the top, 2 to 3 inches on the bottom in terms of especially the areas where we see the highest snowfall amount. So again, this is the gridded forecast from the National Weather Service. I don't really have a lot of qualms with this. I do think everything looks pretty much locked in here in terms of that snowfall threat. I think a pretty good general 6 to 11 inches looks likely for much of like eastern Iowa. We could even push it up to maybe upwards of a foot potential in northeastern Missouri into far southeast Iowa. I think that will likely be the heaviest of that snow up towards about the Quad Cities, kind of this quadrant right in here. Southeast Iowa, northeastern Missouri into far western and northwestern Illinois. I think that probably has the highest chance of seeing the highest amounts, but this will be pretty generous across a pretty large area because we're talking about a big swath, a big shield of snowfall, and this is also a pretty long duration event. That's the other kind of takeaway here, is that the snowfall will likely continue for quite a while. So the lasting impacts of that snowfall will likely stick around for a while as well. And that's kind of what makes this a bit of a challenge, and not only in terms of forecasting, but also a challenge for those that have to live through it, to travel through it, because the lasting impacts will likely be sticking around for quite a while. I do want to look at, this is the Weather Prediction Center here. I think I have a better idea here. So this is the probability of at least 4 inches of snow, okay? So we're going to zoom in here to kind of the heart of that storm. We're talking about 90% chance, and even 95% chance here for at least 4 inches of snow. That's a pretty high-end amount, especially when we're talking about a forecast for the storm primarily, late Monday into Tuesday into Wednesday morning. We're still a few days away, but this is a pretty high confidence forecast for this. Again, we're talking about at least a 90% chance for at least 4 inches of snow. That's just outside the Des Moines area. I think Des Moines, though, is pretty much locked for at least 4 inches of snow because you're well within that 80% chance for 4 inches of snow. But again, I think the heaviest of that snow, eastern, southeastern Iowa, northeastern Missouri into west central Illinois. This is pretty much the same area that I've kind of been alluding to for the last few kind of discussions that we've had. The heaviest snowfall axis looks pretty much locked in at that point. If we do jump this up to 8 inches, by the way, the probability of at least 8 inches of snow, you can see kind of that maximum here is 70%. That remains a pretty high chance for at least 8 inches of snow. And again, that's southeast Iowa to northeastern Missouri. That's probably where the heaviest of that snow will be with this event. We're talking about that snowfall threat. That's certainly a bit of a concern. This is a shovelable snow event. This will have high impacts on the roads and things like that. So travel will be very difficult during this. The other issue, of course, is not only the snow, but we have the wind as well. So the wind is going to be the other issue. We're talking about low visibility, blowing and drifting snow. The one good thing with this is that especially the initial snow that falls, it's not going to be super light and fluffy. And so when the winds begin to ramp up, the amount of blowing and drifting will likely be subdued a little bit, but we could still deal with that issue. So let's go through kind of a timing. This is based on the high resolution refresh model, the HRRR. I call it the HER. We're going to step through this through time to kind of give you a good idea of when snowfall will likely begin to onset. You can see as we go through the day today, perfectly fine. You don't have to go buy all the bread and milk, but probably not a bad idea to have some groceries on hand because you may not want to travel here, especially if you live in more rural areas. You may want to have a few things on hand just as we go through this. We start getting this kind of initial push of snow. I wouldn't be surprised if some of this snow early on doesn't quite reach the surface due to some dry air. This is late tonight towards early tomorrow morning, but this right here, now coming in from southern Nebraska into northern Kansas, this is the main thrust of the snowfall, okay? So here we go, we'll step through time. It starts pushing into southwestern Iowa, northwestern Missouri. Here we are at about noon on Monday. So noon tomorrow, we start seeing that heavier snowfall threat kind of pushing into western Iowa, into northern and northwestern portions of Missouri. We'll step through time. The Des Moines metro area now really locked in that snowfall as we head towards tomorrow evening. So the morning commute for like Des Moines, probably okay, but as we head towards the evening commute, that's when things really begin to go downhill. For eastern Iowa, again, we're also looking at that snowfall probably changing over from rain to snow pretty quickly as you kind of get some dynamic cooling taking place. We will see that changeover from rain to snow into eastern Iowa probably around tomorrow evening. That's when we should see that onset here. And you'll also notice we'll stop it here, let's say about 10 o'clock Tuesday night. And you'll notice some darker blues really across much of central and southern Iowa into western Illinois. This will likely be some heavier snowfall amounts. We're talking probably at least an inch per hour at times with this event. So this will be pretty hefty snowfall as it really begins to kind of go on through here. We'll continue to step this through. We kind of get this initial wave of the heaviest snow starting to move out late Monday night into very early Tuesday morning. But here comes that second wave. We have a second kind of push of snowfall that likely begins to push in Tuesday morning for much of eastern Iowa, northern Missouri into northern Illinois. And you can see this is 6 a.m. Central Time Tuesday morning, and this is just a mess across much of the central part of the country. So not only if you're traveling locally, but if you have some travel regionally as well, do note that there will likely be some pretty significant issues. If you have flights elsewhere across the country traveling through the central part of the country, there will likely be some issues as well. Major hubs like Kansas City, Minneapolis probably will escape the heaviest of that snowfall. However, there still will likely be some impacts up that way, but Chicago, Detroit, we're talking about a lot of major hubs in the Midwest really getting impacted pretty heavily by that snowfall threat. And this will again take us through 6 a.m. Tuesday, and notice that snow is still ongoing. So this will likely be a pretty long duration snowfall event, something we kind of alluded to. If we look at another model that we use, this is what's known as the RRFS. It kind of shows a general idea too that snow pushing in Monday, kind of late Monday morning to early Monday afternoon to western Iowa. Really starts pushing into central Iowa by tomorrow evening. So around the evening rush, starts pushing to central Iowa to north central portions of Missouri. We'll step forward towards late tomorrow evening and a very early Tuesday morning. Here we are at about midnight Monday night, and you can see snow is ongoing through much of the area. There's that second push of snow that starts pushing into early Tuesday morning, and the RRFS will actually go out farther, so we can kind of get a full duration of this event here. That snow continues as we go through Tuesday afternoon and evening. So again, we're talking about a pretty long duration snowfall event for much of the area. That's part of the problem here, is that the snow will continue for a long time. The roads will continue to kind of get covered with snowfall, and therefore the travel impacts will likely be pretty high for pretty high duration here. When you look at the probabilities of at least 6 inches of snow, this is based on the European model. This is kind of the model we talked about it the last few times. I think the Euro had a really good handle on this system from the get-go. You can see it has pushed that heavier band of potentially 6 inches more into eastern Iowa. We alluded that was a possibility. I did mention that in the midterm forecast, these trends could shift northwest, and that's pretty much exactly what we saw here. That shift northwest. I think a large part of this had to do with the lack of snowpack across much of the CONUS. That boundary, that thermal boundary, is much farther north than it typically would be in like early to mid-January, because there's no snowpack. And so that northwest shift is not at all surprising to me as it moved into southern Iowa. So in terms of the snowfall threat, let's just jump through again. The other issue is the wind. We're talking about the heavier snowfall threat. We're talking about also blowing and drifting snow, especially as snow is ongoing because of low visibility. As we head towards Monday afternoon, we're already talking about wind gusts potentially upwards of maybe 25 to 30 miles per hour for much of Iowa. So this will be enough to cause low visibility with blowing snow. Even though the snow will be maybe a bit heavier and wetter, we will see a lot of that blowing happening and even drifting happening. As temperatures begin to fall, the wind continues to increase as well. By Tuesday morning, we're still talking about some pretty powerful wind gusts here, 35, potentially 45 miles per hour. I think there's some potential we could see blizzard conditions across the Midwest. That will certainly be an issue. Which again, we're talking about a long duration event, so this could have some pretty significant issues here. There likely will be a bit of a lull, and then we're tracking a potential second system as we head towards the weekend. Very low confidence on exactly where this system will end up, because the snowpack that the first storm is going to leave behind will help dictate exactly where that system will go. But there's potentially a second system we're dealing with as we head towards next weekend, and there's maybe even a third system as we head towards early next week. So the pattern is very active. It certainly looks a lot more like winter. And the other thing to really look at going forward is going to be the cold. When you look at, let's say, United States, let's look at the 2-meter temperature anomalies. So this is like how much cold things can get. We got that kind of brief warm up before the system comes through, and then wham, here comes the cold air. And we're talking about a fetch of some very cold air looking pretty likely as we head through late this week into early next week. We're talking about temperature anomalies across much of the central part of the country, 10 to maybe 15 degrees, maybe even colder than that, because this is an ensemble approach. It's kind of a blended approach, and you can see some really cold air sticking around as we head into late this week into early next week as well. So we have the snow, we got the cold. Winter is certainly here, my friends. It's likely going to be sticking around for quite a while as well. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody, and we will see you again next time. We'll do some updates down the road. Bye, everybody.